All right, well, we're going to continue reading our story, A Night Divided. And if you remember, let's go back to the end of the last chapter. There was somebody in the tunnel with them. Remember, the light rounded a bend in the tunnel, and a man's voice ordered us to raise our hands and drop the stick. His light shone directly in our faces, preventing us from seeing who he was, but it didn't matter. I recognized the voice from yesterday. So the Low children are doing something far more than gardening. Officer Mueller lowered his flashlight, allowing us to see his face, cast in hard angles of light and dark shadow. In his other hand, a glint of metal was reflected, his gun. Even this far below ground, I'm sure you know where you are right now. The Death Strip. Dun dun dun. All right, so we're going to look at chapter 30. Remember, you're going to be writing a $1 summary at the end of this chapter. So 10 words, 10-ish, 9, 11, 10 words that summarize this chapter. All right, here we go. It felt like hours before any of us spoke. Mueller took his time investigating the tunnel, running his hands along the sides and poking at the ceiling to check how solid it was above us. A part of me hoped the ceiling would collapse directly above him. But of course, that meant that we'd be trapped too, and the death strip would cave in on all of us. Not much of a solution. You've gone a long way, Mueller said, farther than I'd expected. You knew we were tunneling? Fritz asked. How? I knew there was a reason your sister didn't want me getting close to this building, but I didn't really become suspicious until I looked inside the basement yesterday. I saw the pulley and the bucket and asked myself why so much fresh dirt might be in a building that is supposed to be closed up. I could have kicked myself, or preferably kicked him. I knew he'd gotten close to the windows, but never thought he'd seen so much. In hindsight, that was plain stupidity on my part, just childish optimism in the face of reality. Mueller ordered us out of the tunnel, but told us not to climb the ladder up to the surface. Fritz dropped the shovel handle, then walked first with his hands held high, and I followed. Mueller went last, keeping the gun trained on us. If he shot, I hoped he would get me first. Maybe that was selfish, but I didn't want to go through watching it happen to Fritz, knowing I was next. Once we were in the shelter, Mueller ordered us to sit on the small bench. He stood beside the ladder, and here, under a little more light, I saw the gun all too well. No trial is required before I shoot you, he said. You are clearly guilty of attempting to leave the country. Yes, we were. Not even the best told lie could get us out of this one. I was first alerted to you by a woman who lives near your building, Frere Eberhardt. Do you know her? I knew her and suddenly loathed her, just as much as I did Officer Mueller. Loathed means disliked, extreme dislike. Maybe that was unfair. The Stasi would give her much-needed rewards in exchange for information, and after all, she was on the right side of the law, not us. But still, she had betrayed us, and nothing was so low as that. Frere Eberhardt says she first noticed your odd behavior in the week before school got out. Is that how long you've been tunneling? Yes, sir. There was no point in denying that. And how long until you expect to cross into the West? There's no way to know, Fritz said. We're not sure how much farther we have to go or what conditions we might encounter along the way. You're not the first to attempt an escape through tunnels, Mueller said. Why did you think you would succeed when nearly all attempts have failed? We didn't know if we'd get across, I said. We only knew that we had to try. Ah, but now with 2 shots of my gun, you will be nothing but failed escapees. Your bodies will be buried in shame, your mother will be arrested and likely jailed, and your names will be published in every newspaper throughout all history as traitors and cowards. We're neither, sir. Fritz held his head up, clearly determined that if Mueller was going to shoot us, it wouldn't be with us acting ashamed for what we had done. Our country is Germany, one country that should be reunited. We don't belong to Moscow or to the West. We belong to ourselves. I have never betrayed that. This tunnel has taken every ounce of courage we have. We are not cowards. That seemed to entertain Mueller. And so how would you have described, how would you, sorry, and so how would you have yourselves described? As heroes? Are you role models to other young people who are living behind the wall? We're a brother and sister who only want a chance for a better life, Fritz said. And to bring our family back together, I added, please let us go. Forget you've seen us here. I am a uniformed officer of the state and could no sooner forget that tunnel than forget my own name. His attention wandered upstairs as a gust of wind blew through the boards in the basement. It provided enough of a distraction that I wondered if Fritz and I could rush at him, overcome him, and then... Well, I didn't know what. We weren't murderers, and we couldn't hold him there. We didn't even have enough money to offer him a respectable bribe. But we did have a tunnel. Mueller wore a gold wedding band on his left hand. He had a wife. On his left shoulder there was a small milk stain. From a burping baby, perhaps? He looked down into the tunnel. Who else is coming with you? No one, I said. Half of East Germany could be lined up to come with us, and I'd still deny it. I wouldn't rat them out the way Frere Eberhard had done to us. What if others wanted to come? Beside me, Fritz looked confused, perhaps wondering if that was a trap to get us to reveal other names. But I didn't think so. They'd be welcome, I said. You could. No, I couldn't. But from the tone of his voice, I knew Mueller had already thought about it, maybe even before he came here. That's why he'd come alone. His eyes flickered to the tunnel, then over me. I'll go up the ladder first. You follow next, then your brother. If you try any tricks, I will bury you here. He turned to leave, but I darted forward to grab his arm, not to fight, but only to stop him from leaving. He reacted by shoving me to the ground and aiming his gun directly at me. I raised my hands in the air and closed my eyes tight, waiting for him to squeeze the trigger. Would you die for this tunnel, he yelled. Risk your lives, your family, for a run to the west? Don't shoot her, Fritz answered. This was my idea, not hers. I opened my eyes again to protest, but still felt paralyzed in the sights of his gun. At least he hadn't fired yet. With a trembling voice I said, Bring your family and come with us. Bring them to the west. Mueller's eyes widened. Escape? How dare you suggest? There's more room for your family in the west. It's the life you would want for them if you could choose. Fritz caught on to my idea. You don't have to dig, but you might be able to keep the other officers away from this area. Then when we're ready to leave, we can put out a signal letting you know the tunnel is completed. Mueller wasn't convinced, but at least he was thinking. My wife wants to go to America. She has a family there. We need another couple of weeks, Fritz said. Maybe more if we run into problems. But I can promise with all my honor to give you the chance to come. For the first time, Mueller lowered his gun. What's the signal, then? I spoke up. We'll leave a shovel in the dirt outside, a sign that we no longer need it. A long silence followed. Mueller spent most of it staring into the tunnel, and I wondered if he was picturing himself and his family running to freedom. I'd done that plenty of times myself. Finally, he said, I will write it in my report that I investigated and saw nothing suspicious, but I may return tomorrow to arrest you. I tried to catch Fritz's eye to see what we should do. Mueller's terms were terrible. At best, he would do nothing to help, and at worst, he would get us killed. What other choice did we have, though? We had nothing else to bargain with. Fritz reached out a hand to shake Mueller's, irritating me even more. He thanked Mueller. He actually thanked him for agreeing not to kill us. Yet. Mueller turned to leave and then said, Whatever I decide, you must hurry. With or without my help, this tunnel will be discovered soon. If I come with the group who discovers you, I will shoot just as quickly as the others, so do not look to me for sympathy in that moment. All I can do is warn you now, your biggest enemy is time. I wasn't sure about that. Right now, Mueller seemed like a pretty big enemy to me. Fritz only nodded and said, We're going to escape, and your family is welcome when we do. Watch for the shovel outside. We'll cross that same night. Okay, that is the end of chapter 30, so be thinking about a $1 summary. 10 words that can describe this chapter. Okay, more tomorrow.